Welcome to Pure Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 175 of the Total Money Makeover. Not 175 of Total
175 episodes of Total Money Makeover.
That would be that. I'm sure we would have lost people by like episode 12.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe
at that point, we would just be the Dave Ramsey show.
That is true. Which is basically that is the Dave Ramsey show.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: the reason why the Dave Ramsey show exists still and still has lots of listens and followers and all that goodness is because the method works.
Yeah. No, it's true. It does work. And one of the things I like, if you're still listening, if you've already listened to part 1 and part 2 of our series, we're finishing up. This is our third and final review, as it were, of Total Money Makeover. So if you've listened to part 1 and part 2, one thing that I know just for myself, Orlando, people that we've talked to who are listeners of our show who followed this process, is everybody's at a different place, right? Some
Agreed.
people have started the Total Money Makeover years and years ago, and they're still working on, baby step number 2 or 3. Some people are maybe didn't even know about Total Money Makeover, but they could jump right into like baby step 3 or 4, depending on, where they were at financially. And so if you're still listening to this, you may have begun your journey. You might have already started saving your $1,000, starting to debt snowball, or maybe you haven't started your journey yet, but you're kind of thinking, all right, what do I need to do? What is the final, picture? What does the end picture of this look like? So I know what I'm working towards, because sometimes it's hard to have, and we've had this talk a lot about, it's hard to have things like discipline and dedication and gazelle-like intensity if you don't have a really focused goal and motivation and the why. So this will kind of, today as we wrap up this series, we'll kind of look at kind of the end picture. What does it look like once you don't have the debt, once you have things paid off, and once you can start building wealth? Okay, well, what does that look like? What do we do with it?
And it's interesting you bring that up, because I was thinking exactly that. But basically, there's also listeners that are on here that have fallen off the Total Money Makeover path, right? You're back in debt, or even myself. Like I have my Honda Pilot. I'll be totally transparent. Like I owe money on that. Like I bought that. Now, could I pay it off immediately? I could. I chose instead to invest when the stock market dipped, and so I kind of took that road. So I kind of applied a little bit of Rich Dad Poor Dad and Total Money Makeover and made a hybrid. So, but I'm hoping to get that paid off soon. But that's the only debt I incur, and it doesn't, impede is impede the right word? Like stop my way of life. Like I'm good. Now, what I do find refreshing. So as we get to chapter 9, where we're starting, I like what he says. He says the Total Money Makeover is the same way. Gazelle intensity is required to get the wealth steps, but simple maintenance will keep your money muscles maintained. Right. So it's like, people say like riding a bike. It's like whatever else you learned that you can quickly get back to, which I don't know how to ride a bike. So I don't know how that works, but I know, confession time. But what I'll say is you may have at one point been completely debt free. You were like on baby step 4, like things are great. And now you're back at baby step 1, or maybe you're back at baby step. There's no baby steps. Baby hasn't been born. Right. You're trying to figure things out. You can still get back to that. Right. It's going to take hard work, and it's going to take intensity. But, it's like those, and he talked about this, there's these people, and I know people personally like this, which drive me crazy, that they're like in crazy shape, like Mike. And they, they had to really work hard at it. Like they work hard at it for years, and now it's just a maintenance thing. Right. And sometimes they have to ramp up their maintenance, and sometimes they have to go back to the beginnings. But for the most part, it's not that difficult for them to get back into that shape because they've done it before, and they just have to maintain. It's the same thing with finances. There's Dave Ramsey talks about he's been a millionaire twice, which that would have been kind of nice to be a millionaire twice. Like,
no, you only want to be a millionaire once.
Okay, true.
One and done.
But there has to be the self-assurance that like by the second time that you become a millionaire, you're like, things go bad again, I could probably make it again. Do you know what I mean? That's what I mean by that. But it's the same thing here. Like if you're able to be debt free once, if you're able to get your finances in order, and things happen, right? Whether it be family things that happen, whether it be medical, whether it be, there's always those black swan occurrences that take place. You can still recover from that. So hoping that you find encouragement, whether you haven't done this at all, or you're trying to get back to it, or if you're still on that path.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so just kind of a quick recap. We talked about in the very first one some money myths and things that people get wrong about finances, and how most people are just ignorant. It doesn't mean they're stupid or they're not capable of learning, but they just don't know about finances. And then, so there's some myths that get fixed there. And then we have our first baby steps, which we talked about last time, which is save that $1,000, debt snowball to pay off your debt, and then actually build a real safety net, as it were. Actually have enough money for 3 to 6 months of 3 to 6 months of your daily or your monthly expenditure ready to go in case you were to lose a job, there's a major medical issue, something like that, you're good to go. So starting here, we're moving into the next step. So we've got to assume, and some of this stuff seems hard, right? We talked about getting that 3 to 6 months or even more amount of time of savings. That seems impossible if you don't have $1,000 yet, or if you don't have the debt snowball done and you still have a lot of payments you're making. So you have to remember, once you get to this step, it's going to be easier because you've already worked your way up to this point. So starting this one is actually maximizing retirement investing and being financially healthy for life. And one of the things he says here, which I think is really interesting, is investing for retirement in the context of Total Money Makeover doesn't necessarily mean investing to quit your job. Mm-hmm. If you hate your career path, change it. You should do something with your life that lights your fire and lets you use your gifts. Retirement in America has come to mean save enough money so I can quit the job I hate. This is a bad life plan. And he goes on to say, like, for
Such
him,
an understatement.
Yeah. So for him, like, retirement means having options, having the ability to, when you turn 65, when you turn 70, when you turn 80, to say, you know what, I want to keep working. I really enjoy, working with students like I do, or I really enjoy, working at my church or helping people in my community, or whatever your job is. I really love this company that I've started and I love pouring time and energy into it. But I have the option to take it easy if I wanted to. It's not, I'm going to work at a job I hate for the rest of my life so that I can have a few years of not having to work for this job.
That is miserable.
No.
Like, you need to enjoy life now, right? Find what you enjoy now. I like the story that he gives here. He says Harold Fisher was once 100 years old. He worked 5 days a week at the architectural firm he founded. Mr. Fisher didn't work because he needed money, not by a long shot. He worked because he found joy in what he did. He was a designer of churches. His favorite saying was, people who retire early die early. If I retired, that's what I would do. He asked, sorry. That's not what he said. It says, if I retired, what would I do? He asked. It's nice how tone changes the whole conversation. Harold Fisher was financially secure and able to do what he wanted, and that defines retirement the Total Money Makeover way. Right? And I 100% agree with this. Actually, there's tons of studies out there that show that people that retire and then do nothing actually don't live as long as people that continue working and doing what they love.
Yeah. And your work might change. Like, you might leave a job that's like providing you a stable, steady paycheck, and maybe your work becomes volunteer work, right? So it's not so much that you have to work for money, but yeah, I know a lot of people who get to an age where maybe they've worked really hard, they get to 60, 65, they've got enough of a pension plan, 401k, they retire, and after a couple of years and they've pretty much mastered their golf swing, it's like, now what do I do? And they lose meaning and purpose. They don't really have something driving them. And I think as human beings, we have this desire to have a meaningful life, to do something that's valuable, that's important, to pour our energy into something. And that might be spending time with your family and helping raise your grandkids, right? There's a lot of things that can be. So this doesn't mean like you have to have a 9-to-5 job for the rest of your life, but it means you should probably have something that you're doing and putting your energy into. So when you change your perspective of a retirement from, this is just so that I can sit on the beach and drink martinis or whatever it is you do for the rest of my life, what I've realized is that gets really old for people. Like, you can enjoy that. And I know this for a fact in the sense that summer break every year, right? As a teacher, it's like, all right, I'm going to spend a bunch of time staying up late and watching TV and doing nothing, when it's like, what do you want to do today? I'm just going to sit at home and do nothing. Well, after like the third day of that, you're like, all right, well, that was fun for 3 days, but I can't keep doing nothing, right? And so when you change your perspective of what retirement is, it will help you to focus on why you're retiring. Have the money so you have options and freedom, so that if you want to go do fun things, you can, but you're not just doing it to leave a job that you hate.
Well, and he defines it here. He says in the next paragraph, he says, when I speak of retirement, I think of security. Security means choices. That's why I think retirement means that work is an option, right? And that's ultimately what you want. You want not only the freedom while you're, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whenever it is that you're still working, the freedom to choose to do what you want, right? Because you tell your money where to go. Your money doesn't dictate your life. And then to have that time freedom with your family and not worry about, hey, if I take off some time off of work, or even in reselling, right? If I put my store on vacation mode and I decide to just check out, that I'm still okay, that I'm still secure financially, right? That's what we're talking about here, is having those choices. So what that means, do you have those choices in your 30s, or does that mean do you have those choices in your 70s and 80s? Being financially secure, according to the Total Money Makeover way, is all about options.
Yeah, it's good. So that leads us into what baby step 4 specifically is. We have very hard principles all the way up to this point, right? Save the $1,000, debt snowball, 3 to 6 months of savings.
And I would say, yeah, you're right. Those are non-negotiables.
Right, so you get to this point. So then we have step 4. Step 4 is invest 15% of your income in retirement. And then there's lots of charts in this chapter. If you haven't read the book or you don't have a physical copy of the book, we highly suggest getting it, because there's lots of very practical charts that give you, whether it's paying off your mortgage or retirement, what it looks like, how much time, and calculations to use if you're not a math person. It gives you a lot of that stuff. But the basic principle is to do 15% of your income in retirement. And what he says when he says that is, when calculating your 15%, don't include company matches in your plan. Invest 15% of your gross income. So if your company is matching 4% of what you're putting into your 401k, don't count that. And the other thing he says not to count is Social Security. He says, by the same token, do not use your potential Social Security benefits in your calculations. I don't count on an inept government for my dignity at retirement, and you shouldn't either. A recent survey said that more people under the age of 30 believe in flying saucers than believe they will receive a dime from Social Security. I tend to agree. I'm not taking a political position, but the mathematics of the system spell doom. So here's the way I look at Social Security. If you're older and maybe you're already able to draw from Social Security, or whatever the situation is, that's great. You get the benefits of it. But if you're younger, you may or may not have them. And I know there's a lot of people who say, like, it's not going to exist. I've been basically told that my whole life, like, don't count on Social Security. And the nice thing is, if I plan for retirement, assuming that there's going to be zero Social Security and I'm fine without Social Security, then if there's Social Security, then it's not going to hurt me any. I'm good to go. I can then pour that into, maybe my family and helping my son or whatever it is that I want to do with that money. But I don't have to rely on it. So if it's not there, it's like, wait a minute, I was counting that for retirement. So 15% of your gross income. Now, this could be really hard, but you have to remember, if you get to this point in the Total Money Makeover, you don't have any debt except for your mortgage. We haven't got to the mortgage one yet, but you don't have any credit card debt. You don't have any student loan debts, any car payments, anything like that. You have 6 months at least of money saved up. You're good. Like, putting 15% isn't going to hurt you, because imagine you probably have more than 15% of your money going out every single month in debt, right? So if all of a sudden you have no debt, this becomes much, much easier.
You're doing really well. Now, it is interesting. There's some questions that came up, because I will tell you, this is the one where I am weak. Now, a couple of things I want to touch base on. One is it is miserable. I thought about this years ago, and that's why I got into reselling. Not the main reason, but one of the reasons was, the benchmark to retire is like 65 or 70, right? It's whatever the government dictates, right? And I think that's just it was terrible for me. Like, I didn't want to go like, at 65 going, I can't retire yet. I got to make 5 more years. And I think about my own parents. I remember my mom having this conversation going, Orlando, I want to retire, but it's going to cost me. So I'm going to work until I'm 70. And I'm like, whoa, like, so you're going to put your own health at risk, right? To have a check that isn't guaranteed, right? And it was a big lesson for me that, I want to make sure I am secure by 40, like by 45, by 50. So if I wanted to walk away, I'm good. Now I'm not anywhere near there, right? This is why I still resell all the time. And we'll talk about the ultimate step in Total Money Makeover, where it's just basically your money's working for you and you're good. Which sounds kind of crazy, but it can happen. I mean, we know people in the media all the time that we see that live like that. Now, there are 2 questions that came up also, because I thought about this, right? He asked a question, it's hypothetical. 15%, like, that could mean a lot, right? And it depends. Like, I've heard from a lot of people, and I did it myself. Like, some of you give to like your church, right? And your church is, based on your beliefs, 10%. Now, that 10% is a lot easier to give if you give it before everything. Like, some places I know, Like when you sign for your direct deposit and all that, you can automatically say before it even gets to your paycheck, that percentage goes to your church or a charity or wherever you want it to go, right? Or you split. Like for me, I remember I always set it up that way. And I set it up that way too in my car payments. Like I never wanted to see that as my money. I think that's one easy solution, right? With the 15% investment where you can direct that to either go to another bank account or somehow if you can link it to whatever, company to that, allocates those assets for you. That's one way to do it. Now, the other part is if you don't do that and that money's coming in, things get kind of interesting, especially when you're paying, let's say, for your kid's college, or let's say you have, a house payment that you're like kind of tired of paying, or maybe you have other things that come up. And I like what he says. He says, whenever people question why not less, some people want to invest less or none so they can get a child through college or pay off the home super fast. I don't recommend that because those kids' college degrees won't feed you at retirement. That's very true. I mean, I think there was a time when that was true. I think there was a time. I don't recommend paying off the house first because I've counseled too many 75-year-olds with the paid for house and no money. They end up selling the family home or mortgaging it to eat. Like those reverse mortgages, right? Is that what that's talking about? Bad plan. You need some retirement investing at this stage before saving for college and mortgage payoff. Plus, by getting started now, the magic of compound interest will work for you. And that last sentence, the magic compound interest. Like I still reel at the fact of how many, before you work anywhere, like I know for teachers, we always had that one day where the financial people came, right? And you had that retirement or the investing guy. And at 23, I'm like, I'm going to meet with you. Then at 33, I was still like, I'm not going to meet with you. And now that I'm 41, I'm like, I wish I met with him at 23, right? Because there is so much money that you're losing on the table. So much money. I mean, and Mike talks about this all the time, but even to this day, I've regret. So now for my retirement, I have to pay a whole lot more in to get a whole lot more back. So anyways, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, compound interest is amazing. And that's one of the reasons he mentions. And again, get the book if you want all the specifics on what types of mutual funds he uses and all of those, what he suggests. But one of the things he suggests is a Roth IRA, which is great for if you're just a full-time reseller and you don't have a company 401k or a potential pension plan. You've got to meet with a tax person, meet with a financial advisor, figure out what you need to do. But you need to have some kind of IRA, and then a Roth IRA is a great option because you can do up to $5,000 a year per individual. And then it's interest or it's tax-free money, right? So all of the money that you make off of that is going to be tax-free. And then there's other IRAs where you don't pay taxes when you put it in, but you pay the taxes when you pull it out. So there's a lot of different options here, but yeah, you got to think you're paying yourself. So instead of just looking at all of the money you make off of reselling or whatever other side hustles you have going on or your full-time job, if you can get that 15%, but remember, this is after everything else, right? So you should be at this point, if you've got a company match, you should be probably, meeting that. He talks about that with the Gazelle intensity. If it's going to take you 5 years to get out of debt, you should probably be saving for retirement because of the power of compound interest. If it's going to take you a year to get out of debt, well, maybe you put on the saving for retirement on hold to get out of debt first, because then you're going to have even more, discretionary money to spend later. So all of that to be said, he says baby step 4 is not a get rich quick. The investing you do systematically and consistently over time will make you wealthy. So that's just the way you got to look at it.
Let me just read one example that he gives, just because I know we may have younger listeners or individuals that, haven't thought about this. I'm telling you, financial literacy, we talked about this way back in episode 1. Like no one's born with financial literacy. So you don't know what you don't know. So don't feel bad and go, hey, I'm listening to this for the first time. Like I'm such an idiot. Like don't, because especially if I grew up and investing for retirement was never discussed, like never talked about. Having money now was all about that. It was everything, So here's the example he gives. And to me, this is the simplest example I think he brings out in the book. He has a bunch of charts, and Mike and I talked before the podcast, like, hey, definitely should get the book if you want to take a look at all these issues more in depth. But he says, the Roth IRA will allow you to invest up to $5,000 per year per person. There are some limitations to income and situation, but most people can invest in a Roth IRA. The Roth grows tax-free. If you invest $3,000 per year from age 35 right? Some of you are listening to this, you're under 30, you're like 30 or you're 25. You may be 18 or maybe younger than that. If you invest $3,000 per year from age 35 to 65, so 30 years, and your mutual funds average 12%, you will have $873,000 tax-free at age 65. You have invested only $90,000. So 30 years times $3,000. The rest is growth and you pay no taxes. The Roth IRA is a very important tool in virtually anyone's total money makeover. So think about that. And we'll talk about this later, but $873,000, like, I know it's going to sound crazy saying this, but it doesn't sound like a lot right now. Like it doesn't, right? Because of, once you get older, you recognize how much it costs to have a house and a car and college and all that. But if your cost of living is low, right? If you've been living that, that life of understanding that like you can't take everything with you, and sometimes money is better spent with people or to give or to other things, like $873,000 is going to go a long way when you're older. And that's only one piece of the puzzle, by the way. That's only one piece of the puzzle. So I wanted to end on that note in that chapter. Just give that example. All right. Yep. College funding.
Yes. Our next one is number 10. Make sure the kids are fit too. Now, this one is interesting because, again, this may or may not be applicable to you if you've got kids that are young and you're thinking about saving up for their college. Maybe your kids are out of school. Maybe you don't have kids. Maybe you're the one stuck with a ton of college debt. So however relevant this is to you, you're going to at least connect to it in one degree or another. But one of the things he starts off right away is the idea that college degrees do not ensure jobs. One of the problems is, I remember kind of just being sold this, and it was true for a certain time. And there are certain jobs, like my job, I couldn't have without a college degree. So I'm definitely not against going to college. But I think that there was just almost blanketed statement that you need to go to college. If you go to college, you're going to make so much more that taking out student loans isn't going to matter. I remember counselors coming in, like 11th grade year, they started coming in and showing all the numbers. If you just graduate high school, the most you'll ever make in a year is $30,000. But if you graduate with a bachelor's degree, you'll make $60,000 a year. And if you graduate with a master's degree, you'll make $100,000 a year. So even if you take out $100,000 in student loans, you'll have that paid off in like 2 years. And like, that's kind of how it's sold to you. And so you're like, oh yeah, great. No, I'll get student loans and I'll make a ton of money. And the reality is, over time, and I know this to be true because as a teacher, I know that kids are being pushed to go to college. And because so many kids now go to college and it's easier and easier to get into, maybe not state schools, but there's so many private schools that you can go to. Pretty much anybody can go to college. And if you pay the money, a lot of these schools, you're going to pass and get your degree. That the college degree in some ways has almost become the new high school diploma. It's just like, okay, great, you got a bachelor's degree. And it doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden going to get this job making so much more money. And so you have to anticipate that if you've got children that you're thinking, I'm going to put them through college. And the other false thing, and it goes on the perceived value, is if I send my kid to the most expensive school in our area or the most expensive school I can manage, they're going to be making so much more money. And again, that's not always true. You can go to a community college. You can, and he highly recommends going to college with cash or no student loans. And in fact, he says student loans are cancer. Once you have them, you can't get rid of them. They're like an unwelcome relative who comes to stay for a few days and is still in the guest room 10 years later. I can attest to that. Student loans, I needed a degree for my job that I do, but I took out loans. I really didn't know what I was doing. I could have probably paid for a lot more of my college up front and worked. I was working, but I was spending my money on other things and thinking, I'll just pay off this once I have a really high paying job. It'll be easy to make the student loan payment. I'm still straddled with so much student loan debt, and I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Even with the debt snowball, it's really bad. And so you've got to think that. And I would say if I could go back and do things over again, I would definitely do it where I didn't I didn't have student loans, or I would maybe pick a different career path. Not saying college is not right for everybody. It's very right for most or many people. But you've got to really be careful with this, because the idea that, hey, if I take on all this debt, it's going to pay in the long run. Maybe it does, but it's not a guarantee. Agreed. And he talks about this. I want to share a quick example of how things have shifted. In some areas of study and in very few careers where you graduate from will matter, right? And that's true. If you're a doctor or whatever, I know like in academia, if I wanted to be a known professor, like if my next step was a PhD, I probably would go to Harvard. I probably would go to Yale. I probably would go to some Ivy League school to get my PhD.
But that's only so I can speak as a PhD from Harvard, which would get me more speaking opportunities. But if it's something else, it's different. For example, I think about this. So the other day I was watching this old Tom Cruise movie called The Firm. Great movie. OG 80s, right? But, Tom Cruise was like top of his class, like because of who he was and where he went to school. Like they offered him this job. But then again, he was working for the mob. Like it wasn't like it got him it did get him a high-end job, but it wasn't the college degree. Ultimately, well, it was the college degree that got him the job. But ultimately, it didn't serve him that well. Now, that's a very drastic example, but I give you another practical example. So in San Diego, I have some friends that are lawyers, and they do very well for themselves. But none of them went to an Ivy League school. None of them went to, the schools I had just mentioned. They went to schools that I've never even heard of, right? And I've even heard them say, like, it doesn't matter. What matters is how well I do my job once I have it, and now that I can build up a portfolio of people I've helped and testimonials, like it grows my business, and I'm making just as much as the person that spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that job. Now, maybe it took a little bit longer. Maybe the entry to get a high paying job at a firm took a little bit longer, but I think we're in this day and age now where degrees, you can get degrees anywhere.
Yeah. Well, let's make this very practical.
Okay.
You were one of the people who hired me at the school, my first school, right?
Yeah.
You were on the hiring team there. What school did I go to get my bachelor's degree?
I don't even remember.
And then I got my master's while I was there, so I got my pay raise. What school did I go to get my master's?
I don't remember.
Exactly. And so unless, again, the idea is there may be, like, if you go to the highest end schools, maybe it helps you out. But usually those people, I mean, I knew a very, 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 very wealthy family that sent their kids to a high school that cost $40,000 a year for high school. And then their kids were guaranteed to go to an Ivy League school. And people will talk about like, yeah, but they're going to have the connections they need. I promise you that family already has the connections, right? They go to those schools because they have the connections. And we're talking about like the 1% of the 1% elites, and the average person going to a college. Maybe, I mean, you're going to make connections. My very first, when I was a student teacher, I mean, I went to a smaller private school. And my very first job, student teaching, I met a whole bunch of teachers, and it was through those teachers and some connections I had there that led to my first job, and then connections I had at my first job led to my next teaching job. And you build those connections as you go. And so, yeah, the whole idea of like, you're going to get into some secret fraternity that's going to open up like the world to you. Well, I mean,
it's just because we're not in it. That's why.
No, I mean, but
that's why we're saying this.
Well, and we're saying that because, there's a very small percentage of the people who are in those elite groups. But usually, I remember I listened to this podcast of these very, very smart. They're all have PhDs. They're all college professors. Brilliant, man. I listened to them speak, and I like half of what they're saying is going over my head. And I remember even they were saying, like, one of them was saying his wife was from a very, very wealthy family, like what we would consider like blue blood or whatever, right? And he says, going to family dinners with them, being around them, he said it was right away, they could tell I was an outsider. The way I talked, the things I talked about, the things. And he says, even though I have my PhD, even though I'm a college professor, and a lot of them that I'm talking to, I'm definitely smarter than they are. I'm more academic than they are. I'm more intellectual than they are. But they're a part of an elite group that is such a small knit community that they know who the outsiders are. And he's all, I'll never be a part of that group. Like, that's just not a part of the group. So if you're part of that group, you're not listening to Pure Hustle Podcast, I'm pretty sure, right? So there are those, but I think
we're not Illuminati.
Yeah,
I'm just joking.
So, but the thing is, people have this idea that like, if I send my kid to a really good college, or if I go to a really good college, it's going to be me in some extent. And that's really just not the case. And more people are finding that being an electrician, being a plumber, going and getting a trade degree, becoming a videographer, taking some classes on YouTube, going and interning somewhere, and not necessarily taking on hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. I mean, between my wife and I, we're at like 100,000 or a little bit more than 100,000. It's brutal. It's brutal. And so, if I could go back and do it again, I would definitely do it differently.
Now, the other side. So that's one side. So the other side is, let's say there is a school, right? I have a school in mind for my son right now that I want him to go to, and I'm not going to share it. Don't ask in the comments. Like, it is what it is. But let's say you have that option, right? You've done all the baby steps. Now are we in baby step 5 now, right?
I think this is
because we got
5. Yeah.
Okay, right. Baby step 5, right? Because 1 is emergency fund, the initial an emergency fund. 2 is that snowball. 3 is the for reals emergency fund.
Yep.
4 is planning on investing, and now it's saving for college, right? Baby step 5. The thing is, you have the ability to now, right? So you got to make those choices. And like for example, for me is I'm not sure where I land on this. I'm my son doesn't listen to the podcast, so he's not gonna know. But I don't ever want to tell him if I am saving or if I'm not, because I don't want him to use it as a crutch. I don't want him to go like, well, it doesn't matter what my grades are. Like I don't need a scholarship. Dad's gonna take care. Like I don't ever want that conversation to happen, and I also don't want it that if for a reason I lose all my money. I don't want him to go like, oh yeah, dad has all these. Oh wait, you don't, dad? And then, it creates resentment. Now, there's plenty of ways to save, right? Resellers, it, right? Especially if you're doing this as a side hustle. If you want to ramp up that side hustle to save for your kids' college, it's definitely doable, right? If you're in baby step 5, you don't even have to ramp up and do a side hustle, right? You already have all your budget in place, where part of your budget now includes that college savings, right? So you have that option. That's why it's so important to do these baby steps, how they're outlined, so then you can have these choices. The other thing is, I love what he says here. And this is, Dave Ramsey, he does talk a little bit about resale on eBay. I've heard him on his own podcast and his radio show. But he tells about, young people take a high rejection, high paying summer sales job. And those are actually available. But you don't even have to do that anymore. Like I share this story with my son all the time. Before he was born, I shared this on the podcast. I worked at In-N-Out Burger for, I think, 7 or 8 months. It was like I want to say it's 2005. So it was about my 3rd or 4th year of teaching. I think I was a department chair, and whatever. I'd been for a while, and I wanted to make sure I had enough money for when my son was born. Unfortunately, for the reasons not that I didn't know about reselling, I just didn't think about reselling. I took the job at In-N-Out, and In-N-Out paid well back then. In-N-Out, it was $10 an hour in 2005. So that was a big deal. Like $10 an hour, because minimum wage, I think at that time was about $8. Maybe it was $7 and something. Can't remember what it was. So I applied for that job and I got the job. And I think now, 15 years later, I go, wait, I worked 8 hours a day to make $80 an hour. Then you take out the taxes, I probably made $60 a day. And I did that. I think I was working 4 days a week, maybe at that point. I remember I'd go teach, I'd go home, have dinner with the family, and then I go work. And then on Saturdays I'd work, or Sunday. I think I was putting in like maybe 20 hours a week. So if you do the math, right, that's only 700. How much is that? Is that it's $1,200. That's all. I feel so ashamed. So I was working for $1,200 a week, right? So 60 times 20. Okay, just want to make sure we got that right. Man, I got to tell you. So I'm working to make that money, but in reselling, that doesn't take much, right?
Well, it wouldn't be $1,200 a week if you're only working 20 hours a week, $10 an hour. You're making $200.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Wait, why did I have 60 in my mind?
Because you were saying you were making $60 a day.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's even less. Yep. Think about that.
Yep,
that's even worse. So I'm glad I did the poor math, so then people can see that. All right. So think about that. Right? How much is that? So $60 a day, right? And let's do the 20 hours. So 20 hours times 10, that's $200 a week. That's $800 a month. How many of you that have just started reselling after listening to the podcast in the last 3 months can easily pull in $800 a month now?
Yep.
Right? Think about that. Right? And why can't that be instilled in your own kids or somebody that you know? Maybe you have a family friend. Maybe you don't have your own kids, right? And there's somebody that you're able to have a mentor relationship with, and they're thinking about college, and just say, hey, listen, you can work here and you can make, whatever, $1,000 a month, or you can resell and just go to garage sales on Saturdays, list stuff during the weekdays and ship stuff out, and you're going to make way more money.
Yeah. And especially too, like if you've got a kid, and I like that you mentioned that, not necessarily telling them, hey, college might be paid for, but teaching them things like working and Dave Ramsey even talks about this. Being Dave Ramsey's kid was difficult. Like he made his kids pay for their own cars and all these things. I just think like for me, when I was in high school, I held signs, right? Which at the time was like $10 an hour. I think I worked my way all the way up to like $14 to $15 an hour. It's just weekends. I worked at Joann's Fabrics for a while. I had all of these jobs. I was a hustler. I put up, they called them bootleg signs, but they were basically, to tell you like where houses were, like those little signs you see on like the stakes, like around them. And I got paid 50 cents per sign per week. And I had like, however many that I'd have to put out, and it was crazy because I'd put them out Friday night after the government shut down, right? When they weren't patrolling, the city. And I had to have them up Sunday evening because Monday morning, if the city workers drove around and they saw them, they'd pull them up and I'd lose that money for that sign. Right. So I had to get out there really, really, really late in the evening to get those signs up and then go get them down before the next, before the weekend was over. But I got paid per sign. And I just think like all of that money I made, I started like when I was like in 10th grade and I worked all the way through my senior year of high school doing signs and working at Joann's and all of that. And all of that money, I don't think I can account for any of it other than the fact that I paid insurance on my car, I paid for gas, and I had a girlfriend. And so I spent a whole bunch of money going out to eat and buying her gifts and going to movie theaters and all that stuff. And I just think like, if I would have saved that money, I wouldn't have student loan debts right now. If I'd have just put that money aside, saved it, and then when I went to college, I just used that money, I'd have been good to go. But I didn't have anybody teaching me those things. And so now it's like, I can't do the things I want to do with my wife and son because I have student loan debts. Because when I was in high school, I was spending money like it was crazy, like it was free money instead of saving for the college that I was planning on attending. So
you can't be too hard on yourself.
No, I can't. But the thing is, like, if you're now, I look back and think like, okay, like what would I teach my son, right? Even if I'm saving up for his college, where his college is paid for, if he can save all of that money for himself, and then let's say he graduates and is like, I got accepted into this college, I've got $30,000 saved that I've been saving up and investing, and I'm going to use that for all my college fund. And I say, all right, well, guess what, son? I'm proud of you. You got the grades you needed to get. You got accepted. You have all this money. Now you use that money for whatever you want because I've got your college paid for, right? Because then he still learned the lesson, but then I don't know. It's so much better.
I get what you're saying. So this applies in multiple ways. I know a lot of you that are listening don't have kids going into college. I know some of you don't have kids at all. And I know some of you that are past that phase. So there's various ways to apply what we're talking about here, right? And I'm just going to share a quick one as a former school administrator. He mentions the idea of there's somebody that was able to use software and find scholarships and pay a ton of the college. They found like $38,000 in scholarships. I'm telling you, if you're a parent and you have kids and you do not have a counselor that is able to guide you through this process, you can always hire counselors outside, like private counselors. I know wealthy people do that all the time. Or you can research it yourself, but I'm telling you, do not spend your time only looking at a few scholarships. There's so many random ones. Like I can't even tell you. I know kids that have their colleges fully funded and they weren't even A students. They weren't even B students. They had lots of C's on their transcripts. They didn't play all the sports, but somehow they're able to find loopholes in the system where people are willing to give money, just no one applied. So just think about that. All right, that's my 2 cents. And that's to you too as a student. If you're a student and you're listening, there you go. And even if you're in college,
and write those essays.
You can get scholarships as a sophomore in college. You can get scholarships as a junior in college. There are scholarships available for you. So anyways, that's our other side hustle. That's a new podcast.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. Anyways, the key thing is always options, right? The freedom to have options.
All right.
Let's go to the next chapter, though. I think we've belabored the point.
Yeah. So our next baby step is to pay off the home mortgage, be ultra fit. And really, this one is a relatively simple concept. You've already gotten to this point. You've already done all the steps up to here. And so paying off, basically, you just take the debt snowball, gazelle-like intensity. And once you're here, you've got everything. Then just for a little bit longer, take all of the extra excess money you have and just pay off the home mortgage. Now, that's basically as simple as the section gets is just take your extra discretionary money, put it on your home mortgage, pay it off as fast as you can. Now, one of the things he goes through a couple myths in here, and some of the myths. I'm like, did anybody really believe this? But there's one that I know I hear a lot. And so I just wanted to briefly mention it before we move on, is the idea of don't pay off your mortgage because it's a tax deduction, right? The interest you pay, it's tax deduction, it's worth it. And he gives an example. He says,
it sounds like people like don't make more money because you have to pay more taxes.
Right. So he says this: the situation is one of opportunity to discover. If your CPA can add, if you do, so he basically says that a lot of times if you got a mortgage, and he gives an example, and basically the example is you end up paying $10,000 a year in interest, right? And so that $10,000 is tax deductible. So the quote goes like this: if you do not have $10,000 tax deduction, you have a 30% bracket. You will have to pay $3,000 taxes on that $10,000. According to the myth, we should send $10,000 in interest to the bank so we don't have to send $3,000 in taxes to the IRS, right? And if you just really break it down, it's like, it doesn't make sense. If you can pay off your house and not be paying however much in interest every single year, yeah, so you lose the tax deduction, but the tax deduction, it's the same thing with my student loans. Like, I get a tax deduction for the interest that I pay on my student loans. I'd much rather not get the $100 in tax deduction that I get and not be spending thousands of dollars every single year in interest. I mean, when I make my student loan payment, it's sickening. I mean, right now it's nice because the interest is on hold. But when you send $1,000, I mean, there's times it's like, okay, I'm sending $1,000 this month for student loans. And I'm like, all right, well, 100 months, this will be paid off, right? $100,000. Nope. Because of that $1,000, it's like 700 of it goes to interest and 300 goes to principal. You barely see the principal drop. And so anything extra that you start to pour on below the minimum, all of a sudden that principal starts going down. What you pay in interest goes down. So yeah, your tax deduction goes down, but you're not spending as much in interest. So don't let that be a myth that holds you from paying off your mortgage. If you already don't have any debt, you're already saving for your kids' college, you already got 6 months of savings saved up, you're already putting 15% into your retirement, just spend the rest on your mortgage. And I've seen all the numbers. It's pretty incredible. If you make like one extra payment a year on your house, you can turn a 30-year mortgage into like it's paid off in like 15 years, right? One extra payment a year, it ends up reducing it almost in half because all of that money goes straight to principal, which means the following year when you're making payments, less of your payment is going to interest, which means the principal comes down even faster. It's just like compounding interest the other way. And so anything extra, once you've done all these things, he says, save it to the end, right? This is like the big one, paying off your mortgage until you've done all these other things. But once you've done these other things, get this done as quickly as possible.
Interesting. It's funny because I just think of, the other day on TikTok of all places, I have this one video where I had a huge Nike score. Like I paid, I think like less than 1,000 and I was going to make like $5,000 net profit. And one of the comments was like, man, that's kind of crazy. You're going to have to pay a lot of taxes. I'm like, wait, like, okay. So like, what is the alternative? That I don't make that much money because I don't want to pay more taxes? It's kind of like this. I remember, I was really broke back in 2003. I mean, I was right out of college, newly married, had one kid, and had no furniture and no car. I've shared this on the podcast. And I remember like we would get the discount on the electricity bill. Like I think it was like some program that they had, you get like 30% off. And then I remember like 3 years in, eventually, went up on the salary scale, did some side hustles here and there, and we no longer qualified. And then we're like, oh man, like we're going to miss out on that. But then it was like, wait, no, what are we stressed about? That just means we're making more money. We're in a better place. So, and it's the same thing. Exactly what you said. Having a house paid off. Think about how incredible that is. To me, that is such a foreign concept because growing up, you always thought mortgage is for, 30-year mortgages. I remember hearing 15-year mortgages for the first time from Dave Ramsey, and I thought that was obnoxious. But I know so many people now that have houses paid off. It's not like a common thing, but it depends who you surround yourself with. But I know a lot of people that went through the Financial Peace University, and that was like 10 years ago, and now they're debt free completely. They own their house and they're done. So I agree with that. So yeah, it's a pretty simple principle, but it has such reaching consequences if you can make it happen. So definitely work at that one. I still need to buy a house. So
yeah, I'm
still questioning whether I want to buy a house, but that's another conversation. We've had that one.
Yeah.
We're not going to have that this podcast.
All right. So that brings us into our next step, which is build wealth like crazy. And he's had this, there's a subtitle to this chapter. It's called Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mr. Universe of Money. And the reason these subtitles is if you're following along in the book, and you might have noticed we've used a lot of analogies. Some of them we've made up, some of them we've directly connected to the story or pulled out quotes of fitness. And I think fitness is a great example because it's so connects, like your physical body is a great metaphor for so many other areas in life. And he uses this analogy throughout the whole story of, when you first start this, it's like looking at a mountain that you've got to climb and you're out of shape and you're not fit and you're not able to do it. And the whole idea is by the time you get done with this and you get to these harder steps, you're more shape. You're better off because you didn't go too hard at first trying to do everything, but you focused in on what you could do. You started slow. You had $1,000, which gave you the freedom you needed. You got your diet under control, right? Which is like your spending, and you've got all of these things under control. So now we've moved up to the point where you've got your house paid off. You've got all of these previous baby steps done. Now what do you do? What does your life look like now that you've got this money, you've got retirement taken care of, you've got your mortgage paid off? What do you do?
Before we jump into that, though, if you haven't been following us on social media, we are Pure Hustle Podcast on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. We are Pure Hustle Cast on Twitter. And if you're listening to the podcast and you ever want to watch us when we go live or whenever we drop a video, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit that bell notification. Bing. And you know what? Hey, I know this isn't the Dave Ramsey show, but if you ever want to share like your quick story real quick about how you were debt free and how reselling played a part in that, always feel free to give us a call. We'd love to play that on the air. Maybe we could have a special episode. I don't know. We'd love to hear from you. 619-738-1170, 619-738-1170. You could also email us at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. At purehustlepodcast.com. Sorry, gmail.com. Sorry, I just had a thought. I go, how cool if we had like a hustle of the life episode?
Yeah.
Hustle of life.
Hustle of your life.
Hustle of your life, where we just have a whole episode and we share stories of people that they did reselling, and with reselling, they're able to be debt free. And we have enough stories where we can make an episode, and they're exciting stories because, that could be a very monotonous episode too. I don't know. It'd be great. So we'd love for you to call in because here's the thing. We love celebrating success. We love celebrating your success, right? We're just documenting what we do, whether we succeed or not. But if we can always document your success, we love doing that. So
that's right.
And on top of that, hey, thank you so much for the reviews on iTunes. I always am grateful for, they're good. They help us in the algorithm. And for the shirt purchases, again, I'm going to mention it again because every time I mention it, a shirt gets purchased.
Really?
So,
nice.
Yeah. So hey, by the way, donations too. So we just got a major one from someone, you know who you are. I'll probably DM you, but thank you so much. Really grateful. It helps us not only keep the lights on, but it helps us be creative and think about, what more we can do with the podcast once we have, a little bit of more finances available. I love this organic podcast.
I was going to make fun of how you said that right now, but then I remembered that donation
that is true.
Was to teach me to be nicer to Orlando. So
I think I also said assets incorrectly earlier in the episode.
Right. I'm being nicer now. So yeah, I mean, if I'm sure that was just all in good fun.
Okay, so all right, so you know what I'm talking about.
But honestly, Orlando and I are great friends. So I pick on him a lot, and he doesn't pick on me as much on camera.
When you're older, it doesn't matter anymore.
But he picks on me some. So that's just what friends do sometimes. So
we're good. But hey, we're all good. Hey, so thank you so much. I guess Mike will be kinder.
Yeah, I will be a kinder person, and I'll be even kinder if you guys would be so kind to leave us those reviews on iTunes. It means so much to us. We really, really appreciate it. I mean, I look at like the numbers of how many people listen to our podcast, and we have a lot of amazing reviews. I'm always blown away with the reviews we get on iTunes. But if we can just get like a fraction of the people who listen to go leave an iTunes review, even just the stars, it would have such an impact on our podcast, like the amount of growth and the benefit that would have to us. So if you have a chance and you haven't yet already, please go over and do that. It really means the world to us. So thank you so much. For those of you who've already taken the time to leave an iTunes review, you guys are amazing. You're what helps keep us going. And if you haven't yet, consider doing that, and it'd be awesome.
It would be. Yeah. It really would be. All right, let's wrap up the book. But here's the thing. These kind of dreams that we're going to talk about should keep you motivated to keep gazelle intensity. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. So, the idea here is you've done all these things, you've built up wealth, and probably at this point you've already built up some money, right? Not just retirement, you got your retirement paid for, but you've got a lot of money, you've got your toys, you got all these things. So what does life look like? And I like the quote. It kind of starts with this section. It says, what is the purpose of your having a total money makeover? Why did you do it? Why all the sacrifices and work? To be in debt and out of control doesn't take nearly as much effort. Why go through all this trouble? Why do you want to have wealth? And one of the things that I like that he says is you can get to a point where, and he uses 18 million as the example, and I think that's because that's how much he had at one point, or has now, or whatever it was. But you can have the $18 million, but what do you do with it once you have it, right? You work so hard, you get to this point, you've got all this money, and now you've got your $18 million. Well, he gives 3 things that you should do, right? And the 3 things are fun, invest, and giving, right? And that's kind of the principle of this chapter. Have fun with your money, invest your money, and give your money. And so we're going to break those down just a little bit and talk about what that looks like. So the first one is fun. He says, should anyone wear a $30,000 watch? Should anyone drive a brand new $50,000 car? Should anyone live in a $700,000 home? Absolutely, they should. The problem with people is they buy those things when they can't afford them. And this is kind of, in some ways, I don't push back against because I think it's wrong. But when you can't afford something and you're trying to be financially wise and you see somebody, it's like, I cannot believe that they wear that brand or they have that thing and it's just a purse and they paid 10 times what I would buy a purse for my wife and it does the same thing. But if they can't afford it, and a lot of times they can't, but if they can't afford it, why not? Right? Like, why not enjoy some of the money you have? And he gives an example of a guy who calls in and says, should I get a Harley? Right? And
that's a crazy story.
It's a great story. He says, should I get a Harley? And he basically says, like, I already kind of assumed what this guy was like. He said, I imagined he is making $30,000 a year and he's got a wife and kids and he's in debt and he wants a $20,000 Harley. And it just, that most people shouldn't do that. And he starts asking this guy questions and come to find out this guy doesn't have any debt and he's making well over 6 figures and he's got his retirement under control.
Yeah, $3 million.
Yeah. And so Dave Ramsey goes, yeah, buy the Harley, right? Like, I wouldn't tell everybody. I would tell 99% of the people who call in and they're struggling, don't get the Harley, right? It's not for you. But if you've got the money, spend some of it. Now, the problem is some people decide they think fun is going to be the thing that gives them joy in life. And so they spend all their money chasing joy. And he kind of talks about that a little bit later. But if you've got millions of dollars, a $1,000 purse isn't a big deal. If you are struggling to make ends meet, maybe a $50 purse is too big of a deal, right? So it really just depends on where you're at. And a lot of it comes down to like proportional amounts. So me spending $100 on something might be the equivalent of somebody else spending $10,000 on something because they have that much more money. So their discretionary money is that much more. And so should everybody be forced to buy the lowest stuff? Well, no, nobody really thinks that. People should be able to buy the things that they can afford, because I don't want to be forced to buy things that only people in extreme poverty can afford. I like the fact that I can buy clothes that fit me a little nicer and they're a little more comfortable. But I'm definitely not buying Gucci, right? But who knows? Maybe if I'm a millionaire, I'll still never buy Gucci, but I could do it and it wouldn't hurt me.
Well, it's interesting. I think the story of Cristiano Ronaldo, like the top playing soccer star in the world, and he just bought the world's most expensive car. For $9 million, he bought a Bugatti. I ain't going to try to pronounce it right. Cento DHA. I don't know what it is, but there's only like 10 made. But to him, it's like going to like the corner store, and buying a bag of chips. Like it doesn't affect him. And if you're in a place where buying those nice things does not affect you, then it's all good. It's all good, right? And we all have different places that we're at in life. Like for me right now, I don't care for those things because as a reseller, you kind of become callous to a lot of things. Yep. But I will tell you, if I could buy a Ferrari, I would buy a Ferrari.
Would you?
I would. The reason, because Ferraris is like, it's different than Lamborghinis. Like it's an exclusive club.
You want to be a member of the club?
I do. Like you have to be a pre-owner. Like you can't just, you don't have access to any Ferrari. It's not like you can just go and like, I want that Ferrari. Like you have to build yourself up and own a few Ferraris before you get a certain Ferrari. So it's different, right? So, but what I'm saying is that conversation, I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime at all. No, nor that even though I want it, let's say I ever got to that place, I don't know, maybe I would. I just would. I'll just be real. I probably would. But here's the thing. the people I know, so I have only know a handful of people, but the person I know that owns multiple Ferraris and all that good stuff, like to them, it's like it's their side hustle. Like they buy and they flip cars, not because they need to. They buy and flip cars as one for tax purposes, so they have another business and they have deductions. And on top of that, it doesn't cost them anything. And so they actually made their love of cars, they made it an asset instead of a liability, right? And that's what's key too.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And we'll move away from the fun part because it's one of those things everybody can dream about what they'd spend money on if they had it.
There's nothing wrong in dreaming though.
No, for sure. But one, I actually saw like it wasn't really a meme, but it was just like a infographic type thing. And it said something, it was pretty good. And I don't remember all of them, but it was like, everybody should have 5 hobbies. And the hobbies were one that makes you money. I'm like, all right, like I could see that. Like maybe reselling is a hobby, or maybe you're into fitness and so you're coaching other people. And then one of the hobbies was a hobby to help your health.
It's actually good advice.
Yeah. Have a hobby that helps your brain, right? Something that grows your brain. And so there's like 5 hobbies that you should have, and all of them are beneficial. And so, yeah, if you're really into something, like if you really, really love cars, or you really, really love a sport or whatever it is, make your hobby one that you can do that thing, but it also either makes you money or is your fitness or is something, and don't just spend money on something that you can't afford.
Agreed.
So cool. So the next one is investing. And he subtitles that section as investing is how we keep on winning. And what I like about this is kind of the key takeaway here is, especially when it comes to retirement, a lot of people, he recommends earlier with the retirement, looking at like a 5, 10, 15 years if possible, how well mutual funds are doing. And don't be in things for the short haul. He doesn't ever look at the 1-year growth, the 3-year growth. It's at least the 5-year growth.
Or like right now with Robinhood, the 1 month.
Yeah. Don't look at 1 week or 1 day and say like, okay, like but over the course of time. And so he says, if you're in retirement phase, keep investing. Investing is how you make money. And if you think like, oh my goodness, I've retired. I retired a month ago and the stock market is starting to dip. Should I sell everything? And I love the point that he makes here is, let's say you've saved up that $800,000, right? You don't need all of that money at once to live. You're drawing on that slowly over time. Maybe you need $40,000 a year. You don't have any other payments. You don't have a house payment. You don't have any of these. So you have that money for travel, for spending time with family, for buying gifts for your family, for buying clothes for you, food, all of that stuff. So maybe you only need $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. So even if the stock market's down right now, over the long run, these investments over 5, 10 years, it's going to go back up. And so you got to keep investing. And going back, I think our best book that we did that covered this was Richest Man in Babylon. Also, Rich Dad, Poor Dad are great examples of how making your money work for you and putting that money. So once you have that wealth and you get there, don't stop investing. He says one of the problems people have is they often get to the good enough phase, right? Like, I've made it, I'm good enough. Well, if you keep investing your money, you live another 10 years, that money is now things that you can have more fun with. And when we get to the next step, giving, you have even more you can give. So don't stop. Don't ever get satisfied and say like, I've got my house paid off. I don't have to invest anymore. If you can, keep on investing, because that's going to be future fun, future giving that you have the ability to do.
Well, this was the part that was most powerful to me, in the sense that, we talked about this. This is where I think Robert Kiyosaki and Dave Ramsey would agree 100% with each other. So Dave Ramsey says, if you're beginning to think I'm being a little over dramatic, so be it. It is hard to describe reaching the pinnacle point without some emotion. This baby step, the one we're at now, takes us to the point at which your money works harder than you do, the pinnacle point. It is the instant in time where focus, gazelle intensity has reached critical mass, and your money makes and takes on a life of its own. When your money makes more than you do, you are officially wealthy, right? And that's pretty powerful. Right. So what that means is you're not doing anything. Like, money is on its own as coast. And Robert Kiyosaki talks about that in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, about whether that be in different, it's kind of like passive income. It's very rare for there to be completely passive income, but whether it be in real estate, whether it be in stocks, whether it be whatever it is, that money is continually making money and you're only having to do a little bit of maintenance. And then he says, when your money makes more than you do, you're officially wealthy. And he says, you have reached the pinnacle point when you can live off 8% of your nest egg. Like, that is 8%. Like, think about it. Like, when, there was a point in time when I couldn't even live on 100% of what I made. right? This is talking about nest egg. This isn't talking about the money you make working. This is talking about money that you've already invested and you saved.
Yeah. And where he gets that number, that 8% from, is he gives the example that 12% is the average that mutual funds grow. And he breaks it down into 4 different types. Like you shouldn't just be in one type. But overall, and it's true, you're going to have years where it's 3%. You're going to have years where it's 15, 20% a year, right? So the average over 10 years, 12%, it's a good number. Sometimes 7, sometimes it's 10, but you might average around 12. And he gives 4% for inflation, right? Like the value of money goes down about 3 to 4% every year. So if you're having 12% growth off of your nest egg, and 4% of that is money you're kind of losing because of inflation, and 8%, what that means is you can literally pull a check. You can live off of 8%. That means your nest egg, your retirement, you can pull a check from that, and the actual principal of your investment never goes down. So if you've got, I'll just use $1 million as an example. You got $1 million, you're making 12%, right? And you figure forward that for inflation. So 8% of that money, $80,000 that you have coming in every single month, and your $1 million never goes down. It's not like you went from $1 million and then you lose 80,000 of it and then another 80,000 every year, but that $1 million stays $1 million for the next 20 years and you're just living off the interest. That's incredible.
We should just end the podcast there.
Yeah, get there. If you're not there yet, what's wrong with you?
Need to be. That's where you need to be. So now I do like how he ends this chapter when he talks about giving.
Yeah.
Right? Giving is the biggest reward of the entire workout. Giving is possibly the most fun you will ever have with money. I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
It's one of those things where when you can give it's still good when it costs you. Like giving when it costs you is still enjoyable, but when it doesn't cost you and you can just freely give, it's such a freeing experience. And you don't have to wait till you get to the pinnacle point to be there. Like you can give while you're in baby step 1, baby step 2, baby step 3. It's not super advisable, especially when you're trying to get through 2 and 3. But once you get to 4, I think there's a place to give more. But that's just my own 2 cents. But it's a lot, we can get into all the old adages and saying about giving. But when you're able to give in a way that you enjoy, give in a way where you don't regret it, give in a way where the person doesn't expect it, it is so much more fulfilling. For me, it is, than when I'm like, oh, I made this, I had a great week of sales, or it's just a lot better. And so he talks about different ways, but to me, you look at all these very wealthy people, right? And you go, man, why are they giving away all their money? Right? Like, and sometimes we think maliciously, like I do. I go, man, they're saying they're not going to give their kids anything. Like that's terrible. But at the same time, maybe they didn't find any fulfillment in all the money they made. And now they're going, you know what? I wish I was given a long time ago. And I don't want my kids to go through that. Now, again, when you're not in that scenario, it's hard to think that way, right? You go, I'd rather have millions and billions of leftover for my kids. But at the same time,
well, and giving doesn't mean you can't give to your kids too. But
true. But there are some that won't even leave money for their kids.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't think that's good. But when it comes to giving too, so maybe you're in baby step 1 or 2 and you can't afford anything, right? You can't afford anything extra. You're just trying to pay off your debt. Maybe you give of time, right? So you volunteer coach for a team, or you give piano lessons, or you volunteer to food shelter, whatever it is. Anybody who does those things, you get a fulfillment in life and enjoyment that you get. And so maybe when you're at a place where it's money that you can just give freely, and it is true. And a lot of times, again, you got to remember, he also mentions fun and investing. And there's going to be some people who are going to gravitate more towards one or the other. They're going to think, I just want to have nothing but fun with my money. You'll find out how quickly that becomes boring, right? You're not going to find enjoyment and satisfaction from that. Some people are just going to invest all their money. And it's like, well, you're not having any fun, right? Like if all you're doing is investing everything, and some people are going to want to give everything away and not have any fun either. And so you want to have a balance here. But I think for me, at least personally, I know that giving is probably where I'd land on, is like, this is going to be where you're going to get the most fulfillment and enjoyment out of giving away money, giving away time and energy. And again, that idea of retirement, right? It's options. Maybe you get to a point. I remember one of the band teachers at the school that I'm at, he left for another job. But one of the things he was like, if I could, if I had a bunch of money, I would just teach lessons to kids, because I had a person for me who taught me everything I know about music, and he was a very expensive instructor, and he just kind of took me under his wing and he didn't charge anything and he taught me. And I think like, yeah, like how great would that be to be able to not worry about money? You've got your retirement taken care of. So the thing you love to do for a job, you could just do it, and you do it because you want to help people. And there's a feeling of enjoyment that you get from that, and satisfaction that you may or may not get, probably won't get, buying a new toy. So you might be at a place where you're like, I can't even imagine giving. I just want to enjoy things now. Well, once you get to this baby step and you have everything else paid for and you've got all the toys you can imagine, you're like, I don't need another, sandrail or ATV or another boat. Like, I want to help this family down the street who just had a kid and their kid's in the hospital, and I want to help them. And so when you have the money, it gives you the option, just like retirement. So don't be afraid to give and look forward to it.
I love how he ends the book with his last chapter of live like no one else. A couple takeaways. We probably have the same things written, Mike. It's funny when Mike talks, I'm like, oh, I just highlighted it. All right. So here's a few catches. Like the thought of having security with money seems really comforting, and it is. It really is. But it doesn't stop life from happening, right? It doesn't stop from, 2020, if there's ever a year that you should put in your memory bank of an example of like things can happen that you never see coming, it's 2020, right? We're living in that reality right now. And so he talks about there's this fault, and he says sense, CENTS, of security with money. And he talks about like, even though you may have that sense of security, you can also be miserable. But I like the sentence that he puts. He says, the wealthy person who is ruled by his stuff is no more free than the debt-ridden consumer we have picked on throughout the book. He mentions a quote by Antoni Riveroli. He says, there are men who gain from their wealth only the fear of losing it. That is a powerful quote. Let me repeat that. There are men, I love it. Let me repeat that, but let me fumble it. Glad I'm not running for anything. There are men who gain from their wealth only the fear of losing it. That is so powerful. Like, I would hate to be in a place where I worked so hard, right? Let's say Pure as a Podcast, we're on for another 10 years. I hope maybe 10 years. We'll see what happens. That'd be great, right? We're at a whole new place. We have an office building. We're a network. All this stuff, right? Who knows, right? Okay, we're doing really well. And then I have no enjoyment because all I do is worry about losing Pure as a Podcast and everything we worked for. Like, that would be a pretty miserable spot, right? And it's the same thing with money. Like, your sense of security shouldn't be in money, right? It should be there as a tool, as an avenue to secure that place of safety, but it can't be the only thing, right? And so be aware of that. And the other thing, and I'll be quiet after this, and there's so much in here. The other part is, if you are a jerk and you become wealthy, you will be the king of the jerks. And I'm like, that is so true.
Yeah. Before that, he says another paradox is wealth will make you more of what you are, right? So the jerk is one example, but if it's fear, if it's whatever it is that you are before, being wealthy isn't going to solve your problems. It's just going to bring out more of who you already are.
So money is great, right? But money, it's kind of like social media. Like, social media exposes people, right? How many things have we learned about people that we never care to learn about these last 10 years in social media, right? Hopefully on Pure as a Podcast, we haven't shared too much. But anyways, the idea is that social media, right? The more you're on it, the more it exposes who you are. And it's the same thing with money. The more money you have, the more you're not going to care about what people think. The more you're going to think you're all good and everything's fine. And depending on the person you are, it's going to come through. If you're a person who's been mean and you were just, a fake to people, and once you have the money, you're going to feel like, I don't have to be that fake anymore. And then it's going to come through, right? So I think what Dave Ramsey is getting at is that money isn't everything. Money is a great thing. Money can bring, I think it can bring temporary happiness. I don't think it can bring ultimate happiness. It doesn't bring joy. Joy is something that continues on regardless of circumstance. But money is something that definitely can be handled and can be controlled and definitely can give you a better life.
Or it can control you. Right.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's double edged.
Yep, double edged for sure. Yeah. He says, wealth is not the answer to life's questions. And he gives another quote where he says, he who dies with the most toys is still dead. Stuff is wonderful.
Jeez.
Get some stuff, but don't let the pursuit of wealth become your God. And I remember hearing a quote one time, and it just really stuck out to me. And now I can't drive by a cemetery or like a monument without thinking about it. And the idea was when you drive by a cemetery and you see all those headstones, what you're really looking at is all of these people, their dreams, their accomplishments, a lot of those accomplishments forgotten, but those are somebody that many of those are going to be people who've accomplished incredible things. They gained wealth, they gained power, they achieved their goals, but they end up in the same place. And so what you leave behind isn't going to be those accomplishments and the money that you gather. It's going to be the things you do with it if you leave anything behind, right? It's the connections you make, the relationships you build, what you do for your community, what you do for your family, what you do for your church, whatever it is, those things are going to get left behind. And money can be a tool that you use for that, but you can gather all of that money, you can gather all of that power, all of those accomplishments, get the job at the top floor with the big window looking out, and then you die. In 100 years, nobody remembers who you are. So you want to leave something that matters, and money can be a tool that you can use to get there and let you enjoy your life along the way. But don't let it become your God. Don't let it consume you, but use it to do the things that really fuel your convictions and the things that you want to accomplish in life.
100%. 100%. Now, yeah. I do want to end on an encouraging note. That's encouraging too. But I love how Dave Ramsey ends his book. Because here's the thing. And we shared this, you may be in a place where like, what? $1,000? That's insane. Like, I don't even know how to do it. Like reselling. I just started listening to you guys because I'm trying to pay the bills. I can't even do that. Right? But here's the thing. This has been done. He says tens of thousands. I think this may have been done millions of times, right? Maybe not the exact same formula, but it's been done. And he says, these are age-old principles and they work. Tens of thousands of ordinary people just like you and me have become debt-free and even wealthy using this plan. It isn't magic. It is common sense. The exciting thing is anyone can do this. Anyone. Are you next? I hope so. Yeah. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Peace.